Her world crumbled with a single word: rejected. Forced to her knees, the weakest Omega of the Shadow Moon Pack, Elara trembled as a circle of scornful wolves closed in around her. They saw her as a worthless burden, a flaw in their lineage of strength. But as their mocking howls echoed under the full moon, an eerie silence descended. An ancient power darker and more dominant than anything she had ever known seeped from the shadows. A figure emerged, a king of wolves cloaked in midnight fur. When his starlit eyes met hers, the destiny she thought was over had only just begun. The air in the clearing vibrated with primal energy, thick with the scent of pine-damp earth and anticipation. For the Shadow Moon Pack, the annual mating ceremony was the most sacred of nights, a time when bonds were forged under the watchful eye of the moon goddess herself. A night of mixed hope and overwhelming dread. Elara stood at the edge of the gathering, a ghost in the moonlight. While the other she-wolves preened and strutted, their eyes bright with ambition, Elara felt like a weed in a garden of roses. She was an Omega, the lowest rank defined by weakness in a pack that revered strength. Her wolf, a slender creature with a silver coat, was a stark contrast to the thick, dark pelts of her packmates. Where they were sturdy oaks, she was a willow. And willows were the first to break in a storm. Her gaze, however, was fixed on one wolf alone, Cade. He stood in the center of the clearing, a symbol of lupine power, broad-shouldered and charismatic, with a wolf of sable black and eyes the color of burnt gold. He was everything an alpha should be. For years, in the quiet, secret corners of her heart, Elara had loved him. It was a foolish, fragile love nurtured by his rare moments of kindness. A shared glance, a word of praise for her well-tended herb garden, a fleeting smile that probably meant nothing. To her it meant everything. Tonight that foolish hope was a painful throb in her chest. She knew the truth. An alpha needed a strong mate, a wolf who could command respect and bear powerful heirs. He needed someone like Ember. Ember stood near Cade, her head held high, a confident smirk playing on her lips. She was a beta, strong, fierce, and beautiful, with a rich auburn coat, and ambition was burning bright. She had made her disdain for Elara clear from the day they were pups. Her favorite taunt, Silver Shadow, a mocking name for Elara's unusually colored, timid wolf. The ceremony began. The pack elder, a grizzled wolf named Vance, called for silence. One by one, males stepped forward, presenting offerings to their chosen females, who would either accept or decline. Elara watched as pairs were formed, their triumphant howls joining the symphony of the night. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope against the unyielding wall of reality. Finally, it was the alpha's turn. Cade stepped into the center of the clearing, his golden eyes scanning the crowd. For one heart-stopping moment, his gaze met hers. The world seemed to fall away. This was it, the tiny, impossible chance she had clung to. Maybe he had seen past her rank, past her delicate frame, and into the unwavering loyalty of her heart. He strode forward, purpose in every line of his powerful body. But he didn't stop before her. He walked right past her scent, a heady mix of musk and authority washing over her, and leaving a chill in its wake. He stopped before Ember. He presented her with the claw of a great bear, a trophy of his strength. Ember accepted with a theatrical dip of her head, her eyes flashing triumphantly at Elara over Cade's shoulder. The pack erupted in howls of approval, but Cade held up a hand silencing them. His gaze found Elara again, and this time there was no warmth, only cold, hard judgment. "Before we celebrate this new union," he announced, his voice booming through the clearing, "we must address a matter of pack purity and strength." He pointed a single damning claw at Elara. "We have carried weakness in our midst for too long." A collective gasp rippled through the pack. The wolves turned as one, their eyes pinning her in place. The space around her, once just empty, now felt like a void, a vacuum sucking all the warmth from the world. Cade's voice was laced with a cruel performative pity. You have a gentle heart, but a wolf's heart must be fierce. You are small. You are weak. Your silver fur is a mark of fragility, a deviation from the strength of the shadow moon line. You cannot fight. You cannot lead. You cannot bear the strong pups this pack needs to survive. Each word was a physical blow. The secret fears she had fought her entire life were now being broadcast as undeniable truths. The moon goddess provides a mate for the purpose of strengthening the pack. He continued, his voice rising with conviction. To bond you with any male of this pack would be to dilute our bloodline, to invite weakness into our future. Therefore, by my authority as Alpha, I declare your claim to a mate null and void. He wasn't just denying her a chance at the mating ceremony. He was sentencing her to a lifetime of loneliness. You will remain mateless, Cade decreed. You will serve the pack by performing the lowest duties. You will tend to the elders, clean the dens, and you will never again stand among the hopefuls at a mating ceremony. The humiliation burned through her veins, scorching her from the inside out. But the pack's reaction was the ice that froze her soul. They didn't object. They didn't show her pity. They embraced their alpha's decree. Slowly, deliberately, they began to move. The wolves nearest to her shifted, turning their backs. Then others followed suit until a tight, suffocating circle had formed around her. They were a living wall of judgment. Their collective scorn, a physical force. It was tradition. When a wolf was publicly shamed, they were encircled, isolated by the very pack that was supposed to be their family. Kneel, Cade commanded. Her body refused. Her pride, a tiny flickering flame in the hurricane of her despair, would not let her. Ember stepped forward, her new status as chosen Luna emboldening her. He said, "Kneel, Silver Shadow." She shoved Elara hard between the shoulder blades. Elara stumbled, her legs giving way. She landed hard on the cold, unforgiving earth, the impact jarring her to the bone. She was on her hands and knees, the scent of her own tears mingling with the dust. Rejected, alone, shamed. The pack's silent, unified condemnation was louder than any howl. This was her world now, a circle of backs, a floor of dirt, and the crushing weight of a future devoid of love or honor. She closed her eyes, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. The silence that followed Cade's command was a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was a silence filled with the unspoken agreement of the pack, a collective shunning that felt more violent than any physical blow. Elara kept her head bowed, her silver hair cascading like a curtain, hiding the hot tears that streamed down her face. The cold of the earth seeped through her thin dress, a chill that mirrored the ice closing in around her heart. All her life she had worked to be worthy. She had given everything, learning the healing properties of herbs, tending to the sick with a gentle touch, offering comfort to grieving mothers. It was never enough. Her very essence, her nature, had become her crime. Cade let the moment stretch, savoring the weight of Elara's disgrace as it sank into the pack. He wanted this to be a lesson. Strength was everything, and any deviation from it would be purged. He turned to Ember, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. "Now," he declared with booming pride, "let us honor a true Luna of the Shadow Moon." He raised his head to the sky, letting out a long, powerful howl, a declaration of his choice, his strength, and his future. Ember joined him, her voice ringing sharp and clear in harmony with his deep, commanding tone. One by one, the rest of the pack joined the call. The clearing, which had been a chamber of judgment just moments before, now rang with a cacophony of celebration. The sound struck Elara like a physical blow. Each joyous howl felt like a nail hammered into the coffin of her hopes. They weren't celebrating the union. They were celebrating her demise, cheering for a strength that had been built on the public destruction of her spirit. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her palms to the dirt, trying to steady herself to endure. And then it stopped. It wasn't a gradual fading, it was a sudden jarring silence. Mid-howl, every wolf in the clearing fell silent. The abruptness was unnatural, like an invisible hand had clamped over the muzzle of every wolf. The air, once alive with their howls, became eerily still. The only sound left was the rustle of leaves in the night breeze and the frantic, terrified beating of Elara's heart. A new scent cut through the familiar smells of the forest. It was ancient and wild, a fragrance of snow-capped mountains, old-growth forests, and the electric charge of a storm approaching. And with it came a presence, an aura of power, so immense, so absolute that it dwarfed Cade's alpha authority into nothingness. It was the difference between a flickering candle and a raging forest fire. This wasn't the power of an alpha pack leader. This was the power of a king. Every wolf, including Cade and Ember, instinctively lowered themselves into a submissive crouch. Their bodies reacted purely on instinct, recognizing a higher authority that their conscious minds could barely comprehend. Fear, sharp and metallic, replaced the celebratory mood. Necks were bowed. Ears were flattened. The pack, which had just formed a circle of judgment around Elara, now formed a cowering audience for a new, unseen sovereign. From the deepest shadows of the ancient woods bordering the clearing, a figure emerged. Elara, daring a glance from beneath her curtain of silver hair, saw him first. He was a wolf, but a wolf of impossible scale. Immense. A creature of myth and legend, larger than any two of the pack's warriors combined. His fur wasn't merely black, it was the color of the void, a deep, starless midnight that seemed to swallow the moonlight and give nothing back. His paws made no sound as he moved across the forest floor, a silent, stalking predator. But it was his eyes that held true terror and majesty. They glowed with a faint internal luminescence, the color of ice-blue starlight, cold, ancient, and utterly unreadable. They held the wisdom of ages and the promise of swift, brutal violence. He walked into the clearing, his steps silent, a terrifying contrast to the boisterous noise of moments before. He didn't look at the cowering pack. His presence was enough to hold them in thrall. This was Darius, the Alpha of Alphas, the ruler of all wolf packs across the northern territories. A figure of legend, he ruled from a distance, his existence more rumor than reality for most. No one in the Shadow Moon pack had seen him in generations. His sudden, unannounced appearance could only mean one thing. Someone had committed a transgression so severe that it required royal judgment. Cade, shaking, forced himself to his feet, his own alpha pride warring with the instinct to grovel. "Your Majesty," he stammered, his voice now a pitiful squeak compared to his earlier booming pronouncements. "This is an unexpected honor. We were merely handling an internal pack matter." Darius didn't even flicker an ear in Cade's direction. He continued his inexorable path into the center of the clearing, his ice-blue eyes sweeping over the scene. He saw the gathered pack, the symbolic offering at Ember's feet, and the rigid posture of the self-proclaimed alpha. His eyes missed nothing. And then they found Elara. They landed on the small, kneeling figure at the heart of the circle, the one wolf who hadn't cowered, but had remained frozen in her posture of humiliation. He stopped, casting a shadow that swallowed her whole. The world seemed to hold its breath. Elara's heart seized in her chest. She was the weakness Cade had spoken of, the flaw in the pack. Surely the great king was here to finish the job, to make an example of her, to purge the land of her pathetic existence. This was it. The end. The silence stretched thin, ready to snap. Elara could feel the weight of Darius's gaze, like a physical pressure, an invisible hand pressing down on her bowed head. She braced herself for the final damning verdict. A growl of disgust. A swift order for her execution. It would be a mercy compared to the slow death of 1,000 lonely days Cade had sentenced her to. Her fingers dug into the soft earth, her only anchor in a world that had tilted off its axis. King Darius took another step forward, his massive form eclipsing the moonlight completely. The air grew cold around him, charged with an energy that made the hairs on Elara's arms stand on end. She could feel the collective terror of her pack behind her. They were statues carved from fear. Even Cade, who had moments ago stood as the ultimate authority, was now nothing more than another subject awaiting the king's will. Cade, desperate to regain some semblance of control, tried again. Your Majesty the Omega is of no consequence, a weak link. My actions were for the good of my pack to ensure our line remains. Darius cut him off, not with words, but with a deliberate turn of his head. His ice-blue eyes shifted from Elara to Cade for a fraction of a second. In that fleeting glance was a universe of contempt, a silent rebuke so profound it struck Cade with the force of a physical blow. The alpha of the Shadow Moon Pack flinched and fell silent, his authority utterly dismantled. Darius returned his attention to Elara. The world narrowed to the space between them. He lowered his great head, the muscles in his powerful neck tensing. Elara trembled, a final, ragged sob catching in her throat. She was so close she could smell the crisp, clean scent of pine and winter snow that clung to his dark fur. Elara could see the individual strands of midnight black fur, each one sleek and perfect. This was a creature of immense power, and here she was, a broken thing at his feet. But the killing blow never came. Instead, something impossibly gentle touched her. The side of his massive muzzle brushed against her neck, a shocking feather-like caress. It wasn't a precursor to a bite, but a gesture of comfort, a reassurance. A low rumble started deep in his chest, not a growl of aggression, but a soothing vibration that resonated through her bones, calming the frantic terror that had seized her. Elara's breath hitched, her eyes wide with disbelief. Slowly she lifted her gaze to meet his. Up close, his starlit eyes were not just cold power. There was something else there, something deep and ancient that her own small silver wolf seemed to recognize on a level beyond conscious thought. It was a flicker of knowing, a sense of belonging that made no logical sense. He held her gaze for a long moment, a silent conversation, passing between them that no one else could comprehend. Then he raised his head, his regal bearing returning in full force. He looked out at the stunned and terrified faces of the Shadow Moon Pack, his expression an unreadable mask of granite. When he finally spoke, his voice was not a shout, but a low, resonant growl that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. It was a voice accustomed to absolute obedience, bypassing airs and settling deep into the soul. "This one," he said, the words clear and deliberate, each one dropping like a stone into a silent pool, "is mine." When the collective shock of the pack was a palpable wave of energy. Mine, not banished, not punished. Mine. The word hung in the air, electric and irrefutable. It was a claim, an ownership, a royal decree that shattered every rule they lived by. King Darius shifted his stance, placing his colossal body protectively between Elara and the pack that had just scorned her. He was her shield, her living fortress. He lowered his head again and nudged her gently with his nose, an unmistakable command to rise. Her limbs felt like water, weak and uncooperative. But the sheer force of his will was a current that pulled her upward. She pushed herself up, trembling violently. As she struggled to stand, he moved closer, his solid flank, a sturdy wall for her to lean against. The touch of his fur against her arm sent a jolt of warmth through her, a startling spark that chased away the bone-deep chill of her humiliation. Standing shakily, Elara looked at her pack. She saw their faces, once twisted in scorn, now slack with disbelief and a healthy dose of fear. She saw Ember, her mouth agape, her triumphant smirk replaced by a mask of horrified confusion. And she saw Cade, his face pale, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of rage, jealousy, and the dawning sickening realization that he had just rejected and shamed a wolf claimed by the king himself. He had not just made a mistake. He had committed an act of supreme arrogance that could cost him everything. King Darius gave the pack one last dismissive glance. His pronouncement was made. There was nothing more to be said. Without a backward look, he began to walk toward the tree line from which he had emerged. His pace slow and deliberate, expecting Elara to follow. For a moment she was frozen, her mind reeling. Then her instincts took over. She was no longer an Omega of the Shadow Moon Pack. She was the king's. She took a hesitant step, then another falling into place just behind his massive shoulder. walking away from the only home she had ever known into a future that was as terrifying as it was mystifying. The journey through the Shadow Moon territory blurred into a silent, swift movement. King Darius set a relentless pace, moving through the dense forest with an eerie grace that belied his immense size. Elara struggled to keep up, her shorter legs burning with effort, but she dared not complain. Not a single word was exchanged between them. The king was a formidable, brooding presence at her side, a silent enigma wrapped in midnight fur. Elara, still reeling from the whiplash of the night's events, was too intimidated to speak her mind. Her thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind of questions. Why? Why had he claimed her? Was it an act of pity for a kneeling Omega, a political maneuver to humble Cade, or something more personal? The gentle nuzzle he had given her, the protective stance he had taken. It felt too personal for mere politics. But the alternative, that the king of all wolves could truly want her, was too fantastical to entertain. After what felt like an eternity of running, the landscape began to change. The familiar woods gave way to towering ancient trees and rugged mountainous terrain. As dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and violet, a structure emerged from the morning mist, and Elara's breath caught in her throat. It was not a den or a settlement. It was a fortress carved from the very rock of the mountain. It clung to the heart of Darius's stronghold, a masterpiece of formidable natural architecture. Stone towers reached for the sky like jagged peaks connected by sturdy bridges spanning dizzying chasms. Waterfalls cascaded down its sides, feeding a deep, clear lake at its base. It was beautiful, but an intimidating, unwelcoming beauty, a place built to withstand sieges and repel intruders. This was the heart of the king's power. The wolves guarding the entrance were as formidable as their dwelling. They were enormous, battle-ready warriors, each one radiating a quiet lethality. They bowed their heads in perfect unison as Darius approached, their eyes flicking to Elara with undisguised curiosity and suspicion. She shrank under their scrutiny, feeling her Omega status like a brand on her skin. She was led through vast stone halls, her worn-out dress and bare feet a stark contrast to the polished stone floors and rich tapestries depicting epic battles and legendary wolves. She was a stray brought into a palace, and she felt it keenly. Darius finally stopped before a set of heavy oak doors and nudged them open with his muzzle. "These are your chambers," he said. His voice, the first she'd heard since he claimed her, was deep and gravelly, like stones tumbling in a riverbed. The room was larger than the entire den she had shared with her pack. A huge bed, piled high with soft furs, dominated one wall, and a fire crackled merrily in a stone hearth. Fresh clothes were laid out on a chair, and the scent of food, roasted meat, and warm bread wafted from a small table. It was luxury beyond anything she had ever known, but it felt cold and empty. A gilded cage. Darius did not enter. He stood in the doorway, his colossal form filling the frame. "Rest," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You will not be disturbed." And with that he turned and was gone, leaving Elara alone with the crackling fire and 1,000 unanswered questions. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion and isolation. True to his word, Darius left her alone. Food appeared outside her door, and the chambers were kept clean by silent servants who would slip in and out when she was asleep. But no one spoke to her. When she ventured out to explore the fortress, she was met with cold stares and hushed whispers. The king's court, his elite warriors and advisors, saw her exactly as her old pack had a weak Omega, a baffling and unwelcome addition to their disciplined world. The most openly hostile was a tall, imposing she-wolf named Tessa. With fur the color of slate and eyes like chips of flint, she was Darius's beta, his second in command. Her authority was absolute, her presence sharp and unforgiving. Tessa trailed Elara with her gaze whenever they crossed paths, her expression a mix of contempt and suspicion. "I don't know what game you're playing, Omega." Tessa cornered Elara one afternoon in a quiet hallway. Her voice was low and sharp like a snake's hiss. But the king's no fool to be fooled by some pretty face and damsel in distress act. He carries the weight of all the packs on his shoulders. He has no time for strays. Whatever hold you think you have on him, it won't last. Prove yourself a threat or a weakness, and I will personally tear you apart. The threat was real and terrifying. Elara stammered a denial, insisting she had no ulterior motives, but Tessa simply sneered and walked away, leaving Elara trembling. Darius remained a distant, brooding figure. Elara would catch glimpses of him, presiding over his court, training his warriors, or standing alone on a high balcony, staring out at his vast domain. He seemed consumed by a profound loneliness, a king isolated by his own power. He provided for every physical need, but kept his heart and reasons locked away. Elara felt a strange, inexplicable pull toward him. It was more than gratitude. Her wolf, the timid silver creature she had always been ashamed of, felt a sense of calm, of rightness whenever Darius was near. There was an instinctual recognition that she couldn't understand. This connection manifested in her dreams, vivid and strange. She dreamt she was running through a forest under a sky filled with shimmering constellations she didn't recognize. She was not alone. Running alongside her was a colossal black wolf with eyes like stars. There was no fear in these dreams, only a feeling of perfect harmony of two halves of a soul finally reunited. She would wake with a lingering sense of peace and a deep aching longing for something she couldn't name, her cheeks damp with tears she didn't remember shedding. The dreams felt more real than her waking life in the cold stone fortress. News traveled fast in the werewolf world. The story of Darius's sudden appearance and his shocking claim over a rejected Omega spread like wildfire, carried by the whispers of traveling patrols. Back in the Shadow Moon Pack, Cade was seething. His authority had been publicly undermined, his chosen mate indirectly scorned. The humiliation simmered, turning into dangerous rage. Ember denied her glorious ascent to Luna even more venomously. Her pride was wounded, but more than that, her ambition was thwarted. She saw Elara not as a victim, but as a cunning rival who had somehow bewitched the king. "She's a viper," Ember hissed to Cade one night. "A silver-pelted snake who plays the victim to steal a crown. She makes you look weak. She makes us look weak." Her words fanned the flames of Cade's fury. He couldn't challenge the king directly, that would be suicide. But if the king's new pet were to meet an unfortunate end, who could blame him? It would be seen as the tragic fate of a weak Omega, unable to survive in a harsh world. Fueled by resentment, Cade and Ember made a pact. They reached out through clandestine channels to a rival pack, the Bloodfangs. The Bloodfangs were a savage, opportunistic pack, known for their brutality and disdain for the king's rule. Their alpha, a scarred brute named Garrick, listened to Cade's proposal with greedy interest. Cade promised them a slice of his territory and uncontested hunting rights in exchange for one simple task: kill the Omega. Garrick, smelling weakness and opportunity, agreed readily. Soon the tranquility of the king's domain was subtly disturbed. A patrol would go missing for hours, returning with stories of strange tracks. Sentinels reported fleeting shadows at the edges of the wards, protecting the fortress. These were minor incidents, easily dismissed as paranoia, but they created a low hum of tension throughout the stronghold. Tessa, ever vigilant, doubled the patrols, her flinty eyes scanning the perimeter with renewed intensity. Elara remained oblivious to the external threats, her world confined to the stone walls and the confusing turmoil of her heart. Her days were spent in the fortress's vast library, a place no one else seemed to visit. She lost herself in ancient texts, reading tales of the first wolves and the old magic. The stories resonated with her dreams, painting a picture of a time when the Alpha and Luna weren't just rulers, but cosmic counterparts, their bond a source of immense power for all wolves. One evening, seeking a moment of peace, Elara wandered into one of the fortress's secluded gardens, a beautiful, neglected space carved into the mountainside. She was tracing the patterns in the moss on an old stone bench when the scent of something foul and predatory reached her. It was the unmistakable scent of a blood fang. Before she could even scream, a wolf lunged from the overgrown bushes. He was gaunt, scarred, his eyes burning with a rabid light. This was no mere scout. This was an assassin sent to finish the job swiftly and quietly. Elara scrambled backward, tripping over a loose stone and falling to the ground. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it, Tessa's threat, the scorn of her pack. It all came down to this. She was going to die just as everyone expected. A weak Omega, meeting a violent end. The assassin snarled, spittle flying from his jaws, and launched himself through the air, his claws extended, aimed straight for her throat. Time seemed to slow. A primal scream built in Elara's throat, but what came out wasn't a sound. It was light. A blinding silver luminescence erupted from her body. It wasn't hot or burning, but pure concentrated moonlight, a wave of raw protective energy. It formed an instantaneous shimmering shield around her. The assassin slammed into the barrier with a sickening thud, the light flinging him backward as if he were a toy. He crashed into the far stone wall and slumped to the ground, whimpering and stunned. The silver light pulsed around Elara, illuminating the garden in its ethereal glow before slowly fading, leaving her gasping for breath, unharmed, but trembling with shock. "By the ancestors!" A voice breathed from the shadows. Darius and Tessa stepped out from behind a line of ancient monoliths at the garden's edge. They had felt the surge of foreign energy from the throne room and arrived just in time to witness the entire event. Tessa's jaw was slack with disbelief, her usual hostility replaced with utter astonishment. Darius's face was a mask of grim confirmation. The look in his ice-blue eyes was no longer unreadable. It was the look of a wolf who had just witnessed an ancient prophecy unfold before him. Darius walked toward Elara, his steps slow, deliberate. He crouched before her, his gaze intense. "I suspected as much." His voice rumbled with emotion deep and powerful. "The scent of old magic has clung to you since the moment I saw you." Elara whispered, her voice trembling. "What? What am I?" Darius finally gave her the answer that would change everything. "You are not an Omega. You are the last of the Luna Prime line." He explained the ancient legend, a story she'd heard, but dismissed as myth. Long ago, the first Luna was blessed by the moon goddess herself. Gifted with celestial power, she was not a warrior, but a protector, a healer. Her light could mend wounds, calm raging hearts, and form shields of pure energy. Her descendants, the lunar primes, carried this power, but they were hunted to extinction by those who coveted or feared their magic. "Your ancestors," Darius continued, his gaze unwavering, placed a magical suppression on their last surviving child to save her life. It was a charm designed to mask her true nature, making her appear as the weakest of wolves and Omega. This charm could only be broken in a moment of profound emotional distress, coinciding with the presence of a true Alpha King. Your public rejection by Cade was the key. It was the catalyst that began to shatter the centuries-old spell. Tessa stared at her, her mind racing as the pieces fell into place. The silver fur, the strange calming presence, the inexplicable claim Darius had made. It all made terrifying sense. Elara's mind reeled. A lunar prime, her the weak, clumsy Omega. It seemed impossible. And yet she couldn't deny the light that had erupted from her or the deep instinctual recognition her wolf felt for the king. "My line," Darius said softly, "descends from the first Alpha. Our two lines are intertwined. It is written that when the world falls out of balance, a Luna Prime will be reborn. Only by her fated Alpha King's side can she realize her true power." He looked at her, and for the first time Elara saw a flicker of vulnerability in his starlit eyes. "I didn't claim you out of pity, Elara. I claimed you because my soul and the soul of my wolf recognized yours." The revelation hung in the cool garden air, as shimmering and unreal as the silver light that had just faded. Elara wasn't the product of a weak bloodline. She was the heir to a sacred and powerful legacy. The identity she had carried her whole life, weighed down by shame and inadequacy, was a lie, a magical cloak meant to protect her. Tessa, her tactical mind racing, was the first to recover. The blood fangs. She growled, her eyes fixed on the groaning assassin. This wasn't a random incursion. They were targeting her specifically. Darius nodded, his expression hardening into one of cold fury. He dragged the dazed assassin to his feet and hauled him to the fortress dungeons. The interrogation was short and brutal. Under the weight of the king's alpha command, the wolf confessed everything. The secret pact with Cade and Ember, the promise of territory, and the singular mission to eliminate the king's new Omega weakness before she could produce an heir. The betrayal was deeper and more poisonous than Darius had imagined. Cade hadn't just been arrogant. He had conspired with a rival pack to attack Darius's domain and murder someone under the king's protection. It was an act of high treason. He'd signed his own death warrant. Tessa snarled, her loyalty to Darius absolute. We should march on the Shadow Moon Pack tonight and wipe them from the face of the earth. No, Darius said, his voice dangerously calm. Cade has invited a serpent into his den. Let the Bloodfangs make the first move. We will be ready. An open war is what they want. We will give them a battle, but on our terms, on our soil. He turned his gaze to Elara, who had followed them to the dungeon entrance, her face pale but her eyes filled with new resolve. But first, Darius stated, you need to learn how to control what's inside you. Thus began her training. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Darius took her to the heart of the mountain, to a vast, crystal-lit cavern where the raw magic of the earth was most potent. He didn't teach her to fight like a warrior. That wasn't her nature. Instead, he showed her how to tap into the celestial energy that was her birthright. Your power isn't in your claws or your teeth, he explained, his voice echoing in the cavern. It's in your spirit. It's a shield, not a sword. It's light, not darkness. Feel the energy in this place. Draw it in. Don't force it. Welcome it. The training forced them into a proximity that was both grueling and intoxicating. He would stand behind her, his large hands guiding her arms, his deep voice a constant rumble in her ear. He showed her how to breathe, how to center herself, how to feel the flow of energy, not just around her, but within her. His touch, which had once been intimidating, now felt grounding, a source of strength and stability. During these long hours, the walls between them began to crumble. He was no longer just the formidable king. He was Darius. He spoke of the crushing weight of his crown, the centuries of solitude his lineage had endured, waiting for a counterpart that he was beginning to believe was just a myth. He confessed that seeing her kneeling in that circle, so utterly broken, had ignited a protective rage in him, so fierce it shook him to his core. Elara, in turn, found her voice. She spoke of her life as an Omega, the quiet resilience she had been forced to cultivate. She showed him that strength wasn't always loud and aggressive. Sometimes it was the quiet courage to get up day after day in a world that told you you're worthless. He saw in her not a weak wolf he had saved, but a spirit of astonishing fortitude. The attraction that had simmered between them, born of fate and proximity, began to deepen into genuine admiration, care, and fiery passion. Her dreams of the silver and black wolves grew clearer, more intense. She now knew they weren't just dreams, but ancestral memories, echoes of the bond between the very first Alpha and his Luna Prime. She saw them running through primordial forests, their connection a perfect silent symphony that radiated out to nurture the world around them. The breakthrough came during a particularly intense session. Darius was pushing her to sustain her shield of light against the force of a powerful waterfall in the cavern. The water crashed against her shimmering barrier, testing her focus and will. Don't fight it! Elara, Darius's voice cut through the roar of the water. Become a part of it. Your energy is like this water. It flows. You don't command it, you guide it. She closed her eyes, remembering his words, remembering the harmony of the wolves in her dreams. She stopped pushing back and instead let her energy flow, enveloping the waterfall, moving with it, turning its raw power into part of her own shield. The silver light intensified, pulsing with a steady rhythmic beat, calm and powerful, like a living heart. She had done it. Elara had found control through harmony, not conflict. As she lowered the shield, breathless and exhilarated, she turned to face Darius. The look in his eyes was one of raw awe and something far deeper. In that moment, something shifted in the air between them. It was a silent, powerful click, like the final piece of an ancient cosmic puzzle snapping into place. The fated mating bond, the connection that had once been a faint whisper, a magnetic pull, now roared to life. It was a tidal wave of emotion, understanding, an absolute belonging that swept over both of them. She saw his soul, his loneliness, his strength, and his fears. He saw hers, her resilience, her compassion, and her hidden power. They were no longer two separate beings. Darius crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Elara, he breathed her name like a prayer. She met him halfway, her heart overflowing. All the questions, all the fear and uncertainty melted away, replaced by a singular, undeniable truth. This was her place. This was her mate. He lowered his head and she raised hers, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both a surrender and a claiming a bond, sealed not in ceremony, but in destiny itself. The attack came at dusk, just as the sky was bruised with the colors of twilight. Alpha Garrick, patient and overconfident, led a combined force of the Blood Fangs and a contingent of Cade's most loyal Shadow Moon warriors. They stormed the lower passes of the mountain, their war cries a discordant symphony of rage and greed. They expected to find a fortress weakened by internal strife, its king distracted by his new Omega. What they found instead was a citadel of stone and fury waiting for them. Alarms blared from the watchtowers, the deep resonant horns echoing through the valleys. Darius's warriors, prepared and disciplined, met the attackers on the slopes below the main gate. The battle was immediate and brutal. The King's Guard, fighting on their home turf, were a wall of disciplined fury, but the sheer numbers of the attacking force were formidable. Darius stood on the battlements, a tempest of controlled rage. He was no longer just a king. He was an alpha defending his territory, his people, and his mate. At his side, Elara felt no fear, only a strange, profound calm. The bond that now sang between them was a conduit. She could feel his strength, his tactical mind assessing the flow of the battle. In turn, he could feel her steadying presence, a beacon of light in the growing chaos. Cade is with them, Tessa reported, joining them on the wall. Her slate-gray fur bristled with tension. He's fighting alongside Garrick, trying to break our eastern flank. He's forsaken his pack, his honor, and his life. Darius growled, his ice-blue eyes fixed on the fray. He will be dealt with. He turned to Elara, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second. Stay within the inner sanctum. They will not breach the main gate. No, Elara said, her voice quiet but firm, imbued with an authority that surprised even herself. My place is here. I am not a prize to be hidden away. Before Darius could argue, a secondary force of attackers led by Ember appeared from an unexpected direction. They had scaled the treacherous cliff face using hidden handholds, a route betrayed to them by a disgruntled Shadow Moon warrior. Their goal was not the main gate, but the upper levels, and Elara herself. Ember, her eyes wild with a crazed jealousy, burst onto the battlements, flanked by 2 hulking blood-fang brutes. "There you are, you little silver snake!" she shrieked, her face twisted in a mask of hatred. "Did you really think you could steal what was mine? A king! You're nothing but a pathetic weakling." Her tirade was cut short as Darius moved. He was a blur of black lightning intercepting the 2 brutes. The clash of their bodies was like a thunderclap, but Ember slipped past him. Her claws extended her target clear, Elara. This was the moment Elara had been trained for. She didn't cower. She didn't retreat. She stood her ground, closed her eyes, and reached for the power within. She thought of the calming pool in the heart of the mountain, the perfect harmony of the wolves in her dreams, and the unwavering strength she felt from Darius through their bond. Ember lunged. Instead of raising a shield, Elara unleashed her power as a wave. A soft silver light emanated from her. Not with concussive force, but with the gentle, irresistible power of a sunrise. The light washed over Ember, and the enraged she-wolf froze mid-stride, her snarl faltering, the bloodlust in her eyes dimming into confusion. The wave of light didn't stop. It expanded, flowing down from the battlements and over the entire battlefield below. It was a wave of pure, calming energy. It carried with it the scent of chamomile and night-blooming jasmine, the feeling of a cool hand on a fevered brow. For the warriors locked in bloody combat, the effect was instantaneous and profound. The wounded warriors of Darius's guard felt their pain lessen, their stamina return. The attackers, the bloodfangs and traitorous shadow moon wolves, felt the red haze of their battle rage dissipate, replaced by a disorienting sense of peace. Their snarling jaws went slack, their raised claws faltered. They looked at their blood-soaked fur at the wolves they were about to kill, as if waking from a nightmare. The ferocious momentum of their assault was utterly broken. For the first time, all the pack saw the true legendary power of a lunar prime. It was not a power of destruction, but of restoration. It didn't break bodies. It mended the spirit. In the ensuing lull, Darius, having dispatched Ember's guards, moved with terrifying speed. He descended upon the battlefield like an avenging god. Cade, shocked and disoriented by Elara's power, was no match for him. Darius subdued him with contemptuous ease, his teeth at Cade's throat, ending the fight without spilling another drop of blood. Ember was captured, her crazed ambition extinguished. The king's justice was swift and absolute. Before the assembled warriors, Darius stripped Cade of his alpha status, severing his connection to the Shadow Moon Pack and casting him out as a rogue, the ultimate shame for a wolf. Ember received the same fate. Alpha Garrick and the surviving Bloodfangs bent the knee, swearing fealty to the king whose mate could pacify an entire army with a wave of her hand. A new dawn broke over the mountain fortress, both in the sky and in Elara's life. She stood beside Darius, not behind him. Her silver fur seemed to glow in the morning light. She was no longer the rejected Omega, the silver shadow. She was the Luna Queen, her power now a perfect counterpart to her mate's strength. The wolves who had once whispered about her in the halls now bowed their heads in genuine reverence. She had been cast out, humiliated, and sentenced to a life of worthlessness. But the rejection that was meant to break her had only marked the beginning of her true journey. It had unlocked her hidden power, led her to her true mate, and placed her at the heart of a kingdom she would now help rule. Together, Darius and Elara would lead the packs into a new era, one where true strength was found not just in the power of claws, but in the resilience of the heart and the ancient binding magic of the soul. And so the rejected Omega rose from the ashes of her humiliation to become the queen her world so desperately needed. Elara and Darius's story is a testament to the truth that real strength often lies hidden beneath the surface, and that destiny has a way of finding us even when we feel most lost. What did you think of Elara's incredible journey? Let me know your favorite moment in the comments below. If you were captivated by this tale of romance, betrayal, and magic, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this story with a friend who loves a good epic. Most importantly, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in this world of shadows and moonlight. Your support means everything and allows me to keep bringing these stories to life. Until next time, may your own inner power shine brightly.